Hey guys, hope you're well. So, you ain't seen me in a while, and I hope you guys are all well. This is for any subscriber, even if there's one person who watches this video, it'll be worth it. I just wanted to just hopefully encourage somebody to think about this stuff, just like somebody encouraged me to think about this stuff. Okay. Um, I don't buy the official narrative anymore of what's going on, of the outbreak. And let me tell you why. Okay, so I've always been quite politically conscious since my late teens. I no longer believe like the mainstream story about geopolitics when Western foreign policy, when they had said they had to invade countries. I kind of went along with it when I first, became kind of politically aware, thinking, we have to go in, Iraq, weapons of mass destruction, blah, 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 blah. Then afterwards, I realized, okay, this is nonsense and horse crap. And then I started becoming a lot more disillusioned and seeing behind a lot of the facade that they would say to in order to justify U.S. foreign policy. And then I became a Muslim and I started looking into a lot of conspiracy theories. And there's a lot of conspiracy theories thrown around in Muslim communities, like a lot. Um, but yeah, when I left Islam and I became an atheist, I threw everything out. I was just like completely forget all that. Stop listening to conspiracy theories. Stop watching the alt media. People like Alex Jones and stuff like that. Just completely stopped. Then eventually, I became interested again in theism, and I kind of started listening again to alternative media.
We're going to be talking about surveillance in our lives. This means we're going to be talking about power. Whether we're talking about Facebook, determining what ads you see, or something rather more concrete, information today is a convenient means. It's a mechanism for attaining a certain power. And that power today is control. For the first time in human history, it's both technologically and financially feasible for governments to track and store nearly complete records of our private lives. Now, this is not science fiction. This is happening now. When we look at the construction of facilities such as this, the NSA's data center in Bluffdale, this was called by them the MDR, the Massive Data Repository. They called it that for a reason. This was not the targeted data repository. This was not something that was designed just to watch this person or that person. It's because they were ingesting everything, everywhere, and saving it in case it might be of interest later, in case something came up. Someone who previously there was no justification to watch, someone who had committed no crime, someone who was an ordinary person would have their life captured, crystallized, compressed, and stored perfectly, timelessly for 5 years or more, just in case they wanted to look at them. And this is what's happening today. Many argue that extraordinary powers, right, such as these, are necessary for protecting us or keeping us safe. They use reassuring political language.
But because of all those experiences I had, I've just been a very wild person in terms of beliefs and experiences and things like that. I was a lot more skeptical when I tried to apply a lot more critical thinking and be a lot more uh, uh, rational in my approach. Because, okay, I didn't tell you this. I used to believe there was an economic collapse coming, and I even made a YouTube channel about it, and I told all my friends and my family and co-workers about this stuff because I couldn't, in good conscience, if I believed it was going to happen, just keep my mouth shut. Of course, it didn't happen. I thought at least by 2014 something would have happened, but nothing did happen. And I learned from that. I learned I learned to have a lot more diverse opinions when it comes to specific subjects. So, as I said, cue back to being an atheist, and I was reassessing everything I believed and how I arrived at certain conclusions. And I came to a conclusion. One of the reasons why I believe there was an imminent economic collapse because I was getting a lot of my information from people who followed Austrian economics, and they were simply wrong. But people who followed other theories other models of economics, they had more accurate. So I thought from now on, I'm going to try and take things from different sources. So when it came to political philosophy, I looked into loads of different political philosophies, and I could probably have good discussions with people about different ones. When it came to news, I looked at mainstream news, and I also kept my ear to the ground regarding alternative news. And so the alternative news, every now and then they would say things that are like, yeah, that seems to make sense, especially when it came to geopolitics or even just domestic issues. They would just highlight little things. And the big picture they were saying is that there's going to be a police state. We're going to be living in a prison planet. They're increasing their technological surveillance. And I kind of thought, yeah, I can see where they're coming from. They are in certain ways, you know. And I started watching I watched a documentary called The Great Hack, which is a mainstream documentary on Netflix, and it's about Cambridge Analytica, which is a private company that took data from social media and created psychological profiles based on what's called like the big 5 personality traits, like openness, conscientiousness, neuroticism, etc. And what they did is they created personalized ads based on whichever personality traits they found that you fit in. They actually did this. That's not illegal. It's still going on. They're not doing it now because there's a big scandal. What was the scandal was how they received the data and who they work with. But the actual thing, what they're doing, is not illegal. It's actually not illegal to do, right? So I watched that, and they were talking about how much of a threat it is to democracy and everything. I was like, wow, they're right, like based on the story. And then Edward Snowden's revelations, of course, came out in 2013. And I heard them. I didn't really look much into them. I knew about them, but I kind of understood. I was like, wow, that's terrible. But I didn't really change my habits. I didn't use like anti-private. Well, I did to a degree, but I kind of was very on and off about using like block tracking browsers and making sure I opt out of cookies. And I didn't use a VPN or anything like that. And I didn't try to go into cryptocurrency or anything like that to try to lessen the amount of data and things they can get. Because in case you don't know, with the prison program, all our data on like Google, Twitter, Facebook, Microsoft is being given to the US government. And the US government is not alone. They're part of the Five Eyes, which is basically, they work as basically one intelligence community. That is the US, UK, New Zealand, Australia, and Canada. They basically work as one, and the US is the leader. And they're all doing exactly the same thing. So, yeah. So that's Google worldwide, by the way. Or Google, Facebook, Twitter, Microsoft. Worldwide users, all their data is given to to the NSA. So anyway, yeah, so I heard about all this stuff. So that was there in the background. So I was aware a lot of the stuff they were saying is corroborated by the mainstream media, but I didn't fully believe the big picture. And their big picture was that both corporations and governments are trying to move us towards a technological surveillance state.
So how do you think your facial recognition technology will change China?
Everything happened in the public can be recorded. We can know exactly what happened in every second, in every corner of the city. This is a video stream in a subway station by our smart camera, so we can capture every face in real time. Still like some criminal person is out there. There is the red box, so there is a warning to the police station that there is a criminal person, so I need to locate them.
So when it looks out onto a crowd, it's tracking all these faces and it's cross-checking those faces against what?
Criminal database.
And how many fugitives have been apprehended through this system?
Over 3,000 cases in nationwide. Yeah, just one year.
In 1 year?
Yeah, 1 year.
Wow. So what you're working on now already seems like sci-fi. What do you think the future will look like in like 5 years?
Have you seen a film just like a Black Mirror? You just stand there and your face there is a point. So maybe that is the future.
But that's like a horror show.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think that is maybe the kind of the future. Every people have their social points, I think.
If you like spit gum on the sidewalk, it would
yeah, your points maybe.
And your point would go down?
Maybe that is the future.
But that future isn't too far away.
Now China's government is testing a new social credit score system which would rank its citizens based on their online behavior.
While it won't fully roll out until 2020, starting this year, China will ban people with a bad score from booking flights and train rides. But China isn't the only place experimenting with facial recognition applications. An airport in the Middle East is already planning face-scanning aquariums as security checkpoints. In Europe, state-sanctioned and private initiatives are testing this technology in multiple locations, from train stations to online classes. And in the US, private companies are investing millions to secure government contracts, which could make machine learning and image recognition a regular part of police work. Law professor Andrew Guthrie Ferguson is a leading expert on big data policing. He spoke to us about the ramifications that these technologies could present.
When you look at China's system of facial recognition and video surveillance, what do you see?
I see the future and it scares me. If you have the capability to identify people and patterns, and you can show association about where you go and why you're going there, it really will change the relationship between citizens and their governments.
In China, the government has heavily invested in these companies developing facial recognition technology. In the US, it's still more in the private sector. Can you explain the difference?
So much of the story of big data policing has been small startup companies, or even sometimes the big tech companies, that are pushing police to use new technologies. One of the open questions is who owns this data? Take police body cams, right? Right now, there is sort of an arms race of people trying to sell police body cameras to policing all across America. All of that data from all of those officers is actually really valuable for other non-law enforcement purposes. You're really capturing patterns of society. And if the private companies can use that data for other things, even sell it for other reasons, they're gonna wanna profit it.
Governments, because they can use it for political ends, like Edward Snowden pointed out, they were spying, and this was a big shock and big revelation. It was a massive outrage in Europe, by the way. I live in Europe, of course, I'm in the UK. And there's a massive outrage that they were spying on companies and world leaders outside of the Five Eyes, of course, because we're all allies and we work together. So we don't spy on each other. We just spy on other people. We gang up and spy on them. Like Germany and other countries, Austria, they would spy on their businesses as well to give their Western companies of the Five Eyes advantages when it came to trade talks, to give them leverage, to even blackmail them, right? They would do these things. Edward Snowden would speak about it. They would go online and spread misinformation and shut down and try to change political discourse. And there's evidence of this, trust me. They would try to change political discourse online on social media. So Edward Snowden revealed all this stuff, and I was like, okay, so technological surveillance, they want to do it for political ends. And I realized corporations as well wanted to do it to sell us things, right? That's why we have personalized ads and cookies that track everything we do online, so they can better sell us things and do those things called personalized ads, which I'm sure if you're watching this, you know what a personalized ad is, right? So I was aware of all that stuff. Then the outbreak happened, and I was on the side of the mainstream media. And one of the reasons why was because, one, the mainstream media really didn't go that crazy about it when it started happening in China. They weren't saying, oh, it's coming, it's gonna kill everybody, etc. They were pretty silent. It wasn't until it really started hitting in Italy that you started seeing the media going into overdrive, right? And two, I thought, okay, because they started doing the lockdown pretty soon afterwards. I thought, okay, people aren't social distancing, and this is such a dangerous threat. We need it. And as long as they're doing a crude method, this is my justification. If they're just doing it by monitoring people with a physical police force, and just fines, people eventually, if it starts getting out of hand, will just push back. Because it's one thing to have somebody physically telling you can't do something, or monitoring your behavior, because people do not like other human beings in their proximity monitoring their behavior. Like if someone just stares at you, people don't like it. They get annoyed. But it's another thing having cameras and things like the contact tracking app that's come out, monitoring your behavior, because people tend not to mind that much, because it's this non-personal thing doing it to you, even though at the end people can look at it and do look at it. But it's like, it kind of divorces the reality of being monitored or surveilled by people because it's digital, right? So I supported it for that reason. But what happened was, for some, like I said, I keep my ear to the ground regarding alternative media, and I'm aware a lot of people in alternative media were saying it's a hoax, but there were people who were saying it's not a hoax, but it's nowhere near as bad as they're making out. So I came across this video one day, this woman, and she was, I wish I could give her credit. She was ranting and raving and saying, okay, like this is nowhere near as bad as they say. I think she was one who didn't even believe it was real. But she was saying, listen, she was UK, she was British woman, and she was like, read the coronavirus bill, read how they're stripping us from our rights. And she said something, and she said, it's in the friggin' bill, like read it, just read the bill. And I was like, Okay, let me see what she's saying, see if it's true. Read the coronavirus bill, and I saw that they could detain us under the pretext of screening, literally just drag us away. They could break up any protests, and still they've got this power now. Any protests, any gatherings of any kind at any place can be broken up. And they would also fast track surveillance warrants from something called the Investigatory Powers Act, which happened in 2016, which is a massive violation of our rights. It is, like Edward Snowden says, who is now in case you don't know, he has asylum in Russia, because if he goes anywhere, he'll be arrested and probably dragged off to Guantanamo Bay by the US government. He says it is one of the most intrusive bills in history that violates our rights, and it's in the UK. It's a UK bill, right? So we got the US beat on that, right? And so I read the bill and I was outraged, and then I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to take this a lot more seriously, because it seems like they are using this as a pretext for taking away our freedoms and for introducing technological surveillance. Because like all this other stuff came back, like I said, Edward Snowden, the great Cambridge Analytica, the Great Hack documentary, that all came back, and all the things that I'd heard over the years from the alternative media, which is all there in the back of my mind, because they'd always been very good at giving you the big picture, saying, look, this is the big picture, this is their agenda. They want to turn the planet into this technological surveillance state, into this transhumanist state as well, where we even merge with technology, which may sound crazy, but if you think that's crazy, listen to one interview with Elon Musk.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Fundamentally.
Well, let's talk about what you can talk about to what Neuralink is, because the last time you were here, we really couldn't discuss it. And then there was I guess a press release or something that sort of outlined.
Yeah, sure.
That had happened quite a bit after the last time you were here. So what exactly is it? How do you do, what happens if someone ultimately does get a Neuralink installed? What will take place?
Well, for version 1 of the device, it would be it basically implanted in your skull. So, but it would be flush with your skull. So you basically take out a chunk of skull, put the Neuralink device in there. You'd put the electrode, you'd insert the electrode threads very carefully into the brain, and then you stitch it up, and you wouldn't even know that somebody has it. So then it can interface basically anywhere in your brain. So it could be something.
I was listening to all this stuff, and I was like, but then I saw that bill, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna get more into this. Then I looked into the COVID-19 deaths, and this is open knowledge. This is not conspiracy theory. This is openly acknowledged. If you die from COVID-19, you will be labeled as a COVID-19 death. Understandable. If you die from anything else, if you die from something that is not COVID-19, but you test positive for COVID-19, you will be counted as a COVID-19 death. Now,
Dr. Mikhail Varshavsky is a family medicine physician.
You have this massive following on YouTube. You're trying to do something different to what ordinary doctors are trying to do.
The news has come out that he saved a man's life on a flight to Israel.
Dr. Mike is coming?
Yeah. Dr. Mike is coming.
Exactly.
So
yes.
He's compassionate, he's knowledgeable.
We want to get your take on this.
Dr. Mike is here to show us how it's done.
You're coming in for a broken leg, and your leg gets infected, and you end up dying from that infection. We won't just put COVID-19 on your death certificate. If you had COVID-19, you were screened and tested for it and you came positive, we would. That would be counted in the death toll. And you may think that's unfair, that's inaccurate, it may increase the numbers. All we have to do is look at overall mortality for the last few years in a place like New York City. And you'll see that every wintertime, mortality spikes. But if you look at the spike for 2020, it's outrageous how many more people have died. You may be upset about the way we're categorizing them, COVID-related, not COVID-related, COVID presumed, but more people are dying. And the only thing that's changed is COVID-19.
The counter-argument to that, what people commonly say is, well, the rate of death is higher, so that shows that people must be dying due to the influence of COVID-19. But they don't really count that. Maybe it's due to the influence of the lockdown and social distancing measures. And I'll say that for two reasons. And I'm not the only person who said this. Even a mainstream article I can link will even say the same thing. Is that stress Stress is shown. People know this. If you go to the doctor, if you had any heart problems, your doctor will tell you about stress and how bad it is. There's research that talks about how stress negatively affects our immune system. Stress lowers our immune system, and we are living in very stressful times. It's very stressful for people to be locked down. It's stressful for people to not know what their financial future is or the future of their jobs. I work in hospitality, and my job is basically screwed. I don't think I have a job to go back to. I'm on 0-hour contract, so that's that. And I know I'm not the only boat. So that's very, very stressful for people, and that's what we're under. That's lowering our immune system. And also, people are scared to go to doctors. They're scared to go to emergency room because they don't want to overburden the system, because we hear all this talk about the system being overwhelmed, which depends on your location. And so people aren't going. They're not getting regular checkups that they need, right? They're not even getting face-to-face checkups. Like we do it in the UK, we do it over like phone. And if you need more, or even FaceTime, but if you need more, then they'll call you in. But you're not really getting that face-to-face interaction that you need. And the third thing is that relationships are really important for our health. Harvard did an 80-year study, and they found when it comes to happiness and long-term health. So happiness, which is a brilliant stress reliever, is happiness, right? And long-term physical health is close positive relationships. That was the universal predictor that was superior to class, was superior to race, superior to location. It was close positive relationships. If you have a handful of close positive relationships in your life, you are more likely long-term to be long-term happy and healthy and physically healthy than any other factor. And that has been destroyed due to the lockdown. Now it's just virtually we're interacting, but we need that physical intimacy, because we're social mammals and we're spiritually close. We're spiritually, we're spiritually social beings too. We're built for a relationship, I believe. We're built for a relationship. So yeah, so that's been destroyed. 14 minutes, just looking at the time. Okay, so what I'm saying is that I've questioned this, and I no longer believe the official story, especially when I began to look into other things. And I'll post links and videos that I hope you watch when you look into what Google Smart Labs, Google's sister company, Smart Labs, they're both, Google is owned by Alphabet, in case people don't know now, and Alphabet also owns Smart Labs, and they tried to create a smart city in Toronto. People think this kind of thing only happens in China, because it is happening in China. This thing also, they also want this to happen in the West. They had the leaked document in 2016, and the leaked document showed that what they wanted to do is put sensors everywhere. Facial recognition cameras, sensors in lamps that tell people when they're approaching and when they're passing and how many cars are near there. They wanted to have smart meters, and they wanted to have, what the other thing, smart technology in homes. They wanted to have all these things, and they wanted to monitor you 24/7 what you're doing.
Well, a plan for a high-tech, intranet-connected neighborhood in Toronto has hit a major snag. Anne Kavoukian, a high-profile advisor and former Ontario Privacy Commissioner, is resigning because she says her concerns are not being addressed. Now, Sidewalk Labs, a Google sister company, and Waterfront Toronto have submitted a proposal for a 12-acre community on the city's waterfront. The plan calls for the installation of data-gathering sensors such as pedestrian counters. Kavoukian fears residents' privacy might be compromised. Well, joining us now is Anne Kavoukian herself. Anne, thank you for joining us today to talk about resignation. We touched upon it in the introduction, but in your own words, why did you decide to resign?
I was hired by Sidewalk Labs to embed privacy by design into all of the smart city operations. I developed privacy by design years ago. It's a framework of proactively embedding much needed privacy protective measures into the design of the smart city. Now, normally that would involve obtaining the positive consent of the residents of the city. But we know that's not possible here, because the data will be collected automatically by sensors and other technologies. So the opportunity for consent doesn't exist. So what do we do about that? My comment was, you must de-identify all the personally identifiable information at source, meaning at the time it's collected by the sensor, You de-identify it right then and there using very strong de-identification protocols.
Here we have a new neighborhood that will be designed. It will be collecting data because it's meant to be a smart city. People already have privacy concerns every time they go onto a website because it collects cookies. So in this scenario, they would collect data but not necessarily depersonalize, and therefore personal information would be widely shared?
It could be. And that's the problem. And look, I get it. I understand that there's a treasure trove of personally identifiable information that could be used by the various organizations, companies involved, and this will have great value. But that cannot take place.
And not only that, they also had what would be a social crediting system and also a reward system, meaning if you do things that are good, depending on whatever the city determines is good or bad, your credit, your social rating can go up or down, and that can restrict the things you have access to. And also, if you choose to share with them data, a lot of all your data, you'll get privileges. If you choose to not share with their data with you, you will lose privileges. This is the plan they have for the city. And when it was leaked, there was pushback, so they took back a lot of it. But all the data, all the smart city technology, because that's literally what it is, all the sensors and lamps and smart meters and cameras, that was all still going ahead, because that's exactly, and sensors of traffic lights, that's all part of the plan. Right? And they wanted to roll that out, but there was so much backlash from the citizens that eventually they pulled it. But the officials still want them to come back, still want companies to come back and do it, right? So that's what I mean by governments want this agenda of technological surveillance and corporations want this agenda of technological surveillance. So basically the whole point of me doing this video is just to ask people to really question if you really believe the narrative of why they did the lockdown. Do you really believe it's for our benefit, knowing what we know now, that the rate of contagion, what they said, is not true? They've withdrawn a lot of the withdrawn some of the original studies to talk about the contagion rate. That they're openly telling you the deaths are not direct. A lot of the COVID-19 deaths are not directly due to COVID-19. They're just anybody who tests positive and dies is being counted as the deaths. And please look into the bills that they're bringing out. The Freedom Act in America, right? The Earn It bill that they're bringing out in America. They want to bring out in America, and the coronavirus bill and the amendments to the coronavirus bill now, where you can't stay overnight at another person's residence if you're not a member of the household, right? And if you're in private, two people in private indoors can be it's against the law, it's illegal, and they can be fined £100, right? So this is every area of our life has been taken over, and you've got the contact tracking app now, which now that's monitoring. Now all that data tracking they did online now is coming into our offline life. Now we are openly giving them the information regarding who we interact with and where we go. We're giving them that information now. Think about if you've seen the documentary The Great Hack, and the level of psychological manipulation that they engage in, and corporations still engage in, right? They still do it to this day, or the personalized ads. Think about what they'll be able to do when they understand our offline behavior. They'll know us better than we know ourselves. Think about what happens when they start rolling out the facial recognition cameras everywhere. Think about what happens when they start rolling out the smart lamps everywhere. Think about what will happen. Think about all the data and behavior they'll observe, and think about the level of manipulation that will take place. And now it's being normalized now. They're trying to tell us this is the new normal, the contact tracking app, the soon to come push for immunity passports and digital health certificates that you'll need in order to get onto a plane, maybe even to go to restaurants, or maybe even to go into your workplace, because some corporations will say, no, you can't work here unless you have proof that you're immune, because we don't want everyone to be infected, right? Think about what they're doing now with the rioting in America. They've openly said they're using contact tracing to monitor monitor people involved in the protests and riots. They're using a Predator military grade drones to monitor the situation. They're bringing military grade drones into on the civilian population. Like, this is getting us used to this technological surveillance being rolled out. The pretext used to be extremism, Islamic extremism, white nationalist extremism. Now the pretext for this technological surveillance is COVID-19 and the civil unrest, and the coming civil unrest that's going to come from the economic devastation, which is just going to start happening, in my opinion, next year. It's really going to start coming down. So guys, the whole point of this video, if there are any subscribers watching this, I really just want to say, please question this. Please really question the official narrative. And the way we defeat this is through not complying and turning to God. Jesus is love. And if you want to know more about that, please watch a YouTube channel called Love Covered Life. And I'll post a link to that. So stay strong, stay together, and God bless.
These newfound intentions became evident. The San Francisco Chronicle revealed that California's electric utilities last year disclosed the energy use records and other personal information of thousands of customers to agencies within the U.S. government.
Six years ago, smart meters were pretty rare. Today, 60 million consumers have access to detailed information about how much energy we use, how we use it, when we use it.
The most exciting thing for me is that we have an entire organization that's gotten behind data as an asset for the first time in our company's history. And we get a lot of data. We do 221 million meter reads a day, which creates about a terabyte of data every day. We can mine that data. CenterPoint Energy actually works with a variety of government entities in terms of ensuring that we are well positioned.
In early 2015, a high-level utility commissioner admitted that the residential surveillance data gathered by smart meters will be worth a lot more than the electricity itself, which is a $2.2 trillion market.
As General Petraeus has said, make no mistake about it, we have the ability to spy on your households through your appliances. And if we have that ability, we probably will use it.
I mean, this is control freakery. It is the wet dream of the technocrats. People who live locked in a left brain construct that has no room for anything spiritual in their lives.
The mindset of these mammoth corporations who are now apparently in partnership with government.
Eric Schmidt is Google's CEO.
People are treating Google like their most trusted friend. Should they be?
If you have something that you don't want anyone to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place.
Google has already been caught and fined for systematically hacking and harvesting passwords from millions of private Wi-Fi networks with its mapping cars, and illegally siphoning private data from iPhone users.
We don't need you to type at all, because we know where you are, with your permission. We know where you've been, with your permission. We can more or less guess what you're thinking about.
So Schmidt simply views the invasion of privacy as a way to allow the internet giant to gain more information about you. And then that data will let the search engine help you in your everyday life. Don't you get it? Google is trying to amass a huge amount of personal information about you to help you. Duh.
There's what I call the creepy line, and the Google policy about a lot of these things is to get right up to the creepy line but not cross it. I would argue that implanting things in your brain is beyond the creepy line.
Mine in particular.
Yes, at least for the moment, until the technology gets better. Let's talk a little bit about information and search.
Wait a minute, what was that?
I would argue that implanting things in your brain is beyond the creepy line.
Mine in particular.
At least for the moment, until the technology gets better.
Is he saying that Google's creepy line is defined only by the current level of technology? What does a higher level of technology have to do with morals or ethics?
But what I learned in Silicon Valley was there is no moral component to technology unless humans insist that it be there.
What more do you need to know? But most people seem to want to just close their mind to it and just say, oh, the government wouldn't do that, and that can't be true. It is true, and once you know it's true, you get this question in your mind of how did they think they could get away with it, and what in the world are they trying to do with all this data? Why do they need to get into our lives this deeply?
It is such a perilous threat that it is almost impossible to imagine, let alone describe. When the 5G signature goes live, it will tap into a multitude of satellites which are in geosat orbit around the surface of the Earth. Millions of surface antennas will pick up that signaling and will then scatter the signaling into hundreds and hundreds of millions of different micro antenna systems set up on street lamps and even in your home. This is stealth technology. This is invisible science. But what it means in simple terms is that you will be flagged up, visible, trackable inside your own home. Anywhere you move on the surface of the Earth, they will have a lock and load tracking capability over you. You will be visible to invisible masters, each one of us, all the time.
And how do we as individuals protect our minds from this machine?
That's a very difficult question, Dan. It's a very difficult question. You know, ultimately, what it all comes down to is, you know, we've got to admit the reality and face the reality that the world is run by criminals. You know, there's nothing really wrong with technology, but those who are controlling the direction this technology is going are very bad people. Exhibit A, the Earth. Have a look at the place. And you consider that every problem that we have on this Earth exists because it's legislated to exist, you know. And whether the governments are just a facade that we can get to and there's a working behind that, whatever, but that's still the mechanism we have to deal with. These towers, these 5G towers they're putting up are doing harm. They're causing harm. You know, we created a legal system to prevent the causation of harm and to provide remedy when harm is caused. And now our government is using that very legal system to inflict harm upon us, and we're told we can't do anything about it. Well, that's not acceptable. You know, these people were elected by us to manage our infrastructure in a responsible manner. That is the sole purpose of government if it's going to exist at all. And if it doesn't do that, then it has no right. It is invalid. So we need to pull this infrastructure down. We really do. But in order to do that, I mean, we can't just be some violent domestic terrorist. You've got to bring this awareness to the people that these towers are doing them damage. You don't need bandwidth that fast. And they're not doing it so you can download movies quickly. They're doing it so they can track every single thing you do and bring in this social crediting system to control even everything you think.